The snow fell thick and soundless over London that December night, cloaking the city in a deceptive peace. Gas lamps hissed in the damp air, and the streets glittered like mirrors beneath carriage wheels as they rolled toward Kensington Palace, where warmth, music, and rank conspired to outshine the winter's cold. Within those gilded walls, the court of Queen Victoria convened for the winter ball, an evening devoted not only to dance, but to scrutiny, that most cherished pastime of the English elite. Lady Eleanor Harcourt arrived precisely at 9. Her carriage, though modest compared to those of the dukes and viscounts glittering before her, bore the faint emblem of her family crest, a relic of better years. She stepped out in a gown of soft gray silk, neither daring nor dull, chosen to deflect attention rather than draw it. Yet attention found her all the same. The whisper of her name moved through the crowd like a draft under a closed door. "Lady Harcourt, is it?" someone murmured behind a fan. Poor creature, still pretending she belongs. She ought never to have shown her face again. Came another voice, lower, sharper. Eleanor pretended not to hear. She had mastered the art of silence, the armor of the fallen. Her chin remained high, her steps measured as she entered the ballroom, where chandeliers burned like constellations and the scent of roses mingled with wax and perfume. The orchestra swelled, violins trembling with a waltz that seemed to mock her heartbeat. 2 years ago, she had been the envy of that same room, promised to Commander Nathaniel Ashbourne, a rising naval officer, decorated and adored, the very portrait of duty and promise. Their engagement had been announced beneath the Queen's gaze, their affection whispered of approvingly. Until, one morning, letters surfaced, letters written in her hand, to a man not her betrothed. Letters no one could prove she had ever sent. Scandal was not about truth, only timing, and hers had been disastrous. Nathaniel vanished to sea before she could defend herself. The invitations ceased. The visits stopped, and London learned a new cruelty, pity. Lady Eleanor. The voice broke her reverie. Turning, she faced the Duchess of Wexford, a woman whose beauty was as calculated as her venom. The Duchess's smile gleamed like cut glass. "How very brave of you to attend," she said. "I confess, when I heard you return to town, I doubted my ears. One hears such dreadful things, and one hopes they are untrue." Eleanor inclined her head. "Hope, your grace, is the luxury of those who can afford disappointment." The Duchess's smile tightened. "How quaint! And your gown, so demure. It quite suits your new station." A few nearby guests tittered. Eleanor felt the sting rise to her cheeks, but forced herself to remain still, a portrait of civility framed by ridicule. She had learned that defiance, when quiet, unsettled far more than anger. Yet even she was unprepared for the final blow. As the orchestra struck another waltz, the crowd shifted, parting slightly near the grand staircase. The room seemed still. There, newly arrived and radiant in naval uniform, stood Nathaniel Ashbourne. His face was leaner, his bearing graver, the boyish charm replaced by something sterner, almost solemn. The decorations on his chest caught the candlelight like stars upon dark water. Whispers cascaded through the hall. "Returned from the Baltic. Presented Her Majesty only this morning. They say he refused every invitation until tonight." Eleanor's heart stilled. For a moment, the years between them vanished. The secret laughter, the letters real ones, not forged, the promise of a spring wedding that never came. But when his gaze finally met hers, it was distant, unreadable. He bowed, formal and brief. She curtsied in return, her knees trembling beneath silk. No smile, no word, not even a flicker of recognition passed between them. The orchestra resumed, louder, as if to fill the hollow silence. The Duchess, standing close enough for cruelty, leaned in. "You'll always be alone," she whispered, voice soft as poison. "Men may forgive each other's sins, but not a woman's embarrassment." Eleanor's lips curved faintly, though her chest constricted. "Then I shall find solace in solitude, your grace. It is quieter than hypocrisy." The Duchess's eyes flashed, but before she could reply, Nathaniel was already leading another woman to the floor, a viscount's daughter, delicate and untainted. Eleanor watched as they turned beneath the chandeliers, his hand steady at the girl's waist. Something in her broke, not loudly, not visibly, but with the precise soundlessness of a heart taught to suffer in silence. She turned away, her breath shallow. The air seemed heavier now, the laughter shriller. Every polished face in that room gleamed like a mirror of judgment. And yet, beneath her humiliation, a strange calm began to form, a kind of clarity forged from fire. For years she had prayed for oblivion, for time to dull the ache of disgrace. But standing in that ballroom, surrounded by beauty built upon deceit, she saw her ruin for what it truly was, freedom. She had nothing left to lose, no reputation to preserve, no mask to maintain. Society had stripped her bare. She would decide what to wear next. As she walked toward the balcony, cold air brushed her face, crisp and merciful. The city sprawled below, its thousands of lights trembling through the mist. Somewhere out there, truth slept beneath the noise of gossip. Somewhere, a life of her own making waited. Behind her, the laughter and violins continued, hollow, endless. She did not look back. Her hand rested lightly on the stone balustrade, and she whispered, almost to herself, "If solitude is to be my prison, I shall carve the key myself." Inside, the music swelled again, but Eleanor did not hear it. The night, vast and indifferent, spread before her like an unopened letter, and she, no longer the timid Ducky, felt the first quiet stirrings of resolve. Something had ended that night. Yes, but something else, fierce and glimmering, had just begun. Rain fell steadily against the tall windows of Harcourt House, its rhythm soft yet unrelenting, as though the heavens sought to wash away the stains of a past that refused to fade. Inside, Lady Eleanor Harcourt sat before a dying fire, the orange glow flickering across her composed features. Once a home of music and merriment, the house now echoed only the faint ticking of a clock and the sigh of old wood shifting under the damp. Servants had been dismissed months ago, save for one elderly maid who moved like a ghost through the halls. Pride had kept Eleanor from selling the estate, but necessity now whispered otherwise. She reached for a stack of letters, her mother's correspondence, tied in a pale blue ribbon and yellowed by time. They were to be sorted and sold, along with her mother's jewelry, to pay creditors circling like quiet vultures. Yet as she unfolded one letter after another, the past began to murmur secrets she had never meant to hear. Among the ordinary notes of invitations and condolences lay a smaller envelope, unmarked but sealed with the imprint of a signet she did not recognize. The wax was brittle. It cracked easily beneath her touch. Inside were several pages written in an unfamiliar hand, measured, coded, and strangely urgent. The phrases were veiled in metaphor, but their meaning shimmered through talk of the Irish cause, the Emerald Circle, and funds diverted under the guise of charity. Her brow furrowed. These were not idle political musings. They were the language of conspiracy. Her mother had been gentle, charitable, and utterly unsuited for intrigue. Could she have been drawn, perhaps unwittingly, into something dangerous? Eleanor read on, her pulse quickening. The letters named no one outright, but she recognized the initials LP, Lord Pembroke, her mother's longtime patron. He had often visited during Eleanor's girlhood, bringing flowers from his gardens and volumes of poetry, his manner kindly but reserved. He had been among the few who still nodded to her after her fall from grace. The next morning, beneath a sky the color of pewter, Eleanor summoned her courage and requested an audience with him. His townhouse near Grosvenor Square was grand but subdued, its walls heavy with tapestries and portraits that seemed to watch intruders with silent suspicion. Lord Pembroke greeted her with a warmth too rehearsed to be genuine. His hair had turned more silver than she remembered, but his eyes remained sharp, darting between courtesy and calculation. "My dear Lady Harcourt," he said, guiding her toward the hearth. "What a pleasant surprise. I had feared London's chill might drive you to the countryside." "I find the countryside too honest," she replied evenly. One cannot hide behind civility there. He chuckled softly, spoken like a woman who has learned much. She drew the letter from a reticule. I found this among my mother's things. I was unaware of her connection to Irish politics. I hoped you might enlighten me. For the briefest instant, he hesitated, just enough to confirm her suspicions. Ah, he said slowly, taking the pages with careful fingers. Yes, I recall these matters. Your mother supported certain charitable ventures. Nothing more. Charity rarely requires encryption, Eleanor replied, her gaze unflinching. He folded the letter and returned it to her. Then burn it, my dear. Some causes are better forgotten. The world has teeth for those who ask too many questions. She left him with a polite curtsy, but carried away more than she had brought. A tremor of danger, and a sense that the same network of deceit that had once ruined her reputation still thrived in higher places. That night, unable to sleep, she wrote a letter of her own, addressed not to a friend, but to Sir James Hawthorne, an official within the Queen's confidential bureau. She offered the letters and her silence in exchange for an audience. She did not know precisely what she risked, only that inaction now felt worse than fear. 2 days later, a carriage bearing the royal insignia appeared at her gate. From it stepped a man she had not expected to see again in this lifetime, Commander Nathaniel Ashbourne. He removed his hat as he entered the drawing room, rain still glistening on his shoulders. Time had deepened the lines around his eyes, but not dulled their clarity. Lady Harcourt, he said, bowing with restrained formality. I am to collect certain documents on behalf of Sir James Hawthorne. I was unaware that the informant was you. Eleanor kept her composure, though her pulse leapt. Informant is such an ugly word. Let us say a woman seeking justice. He regarded her for a long moment. I thought you sought peace. I did, she said. But peace is a luxury of the blameless. He flinched as if struck. For a moment, the formality between them wavered. You think I abandoned you, he said quietly. But you know not half the story. Then tell me the whole of it. His jaw tightened. Not here. Not yet. A gust of wind rattled the window, and the fire guttered low. When he turned to leave, something fell from his coat pocket. A small brass insignia, tarnished but gleaming faintly in the firelight. He did not notice. Eleanor bent to retrieve it after he'd gone, holding it in her palm. The weight was insignificant, yet it felt like the proof of something unfinished between them, some bridge not yet burned. As the rain drummed harder against the windows, she stared into the fire until the embers blurred. The letters lay beside her, evidence of treachery among men who had laughed at her disgrace. For the first time in years, she felt the sharp pull of purpose. She placed the insignia on the table beside the documents, symbols of 2 separate wars that might yet converge. Very well, she murmured into the crackling quiet. If the world insists on my silence, I shall make it listen. Outside, the storm deepened, thunder rolling faintly over the city. Within, Lady Eleanor straightened her shoulders, the fire catching in her eyes like the reflection of resolve. What began as shame was turning, inch by inch, into power, and she could feel, in the marrow of her bones, that neither scandal nor storm had seen the last of her. The spring of 1848 arrived with deceptive gentleness, as though London itself wished to forget its winter of whispers. The air carried a faint sweetness, and the city's gardens bloomed despite the unease that rippled beneath the seasoned surface. Lady Eleanor Harcourt stood within the Queen's private conservatory, surrounded by glass and greenery, where light fell in soft golden shafts through panes veiled by climbing ivy. The place smelled of damp earth and jasmine, a sanctuary far removed from the world's judgment. Yet her hands trembled slightly as she unfolded the ciphered document she had hidden for weeks, knowing that every word upon it could alter lives. The summons from Sir James Hawthorne had come abruptly, written in the clipped manner of a man too loyal to trust emotion. The Queen herself, he had said, wished the matter concluded quietly. Eleanor was to deliver the final letters that night, and she was not to arrive alone. She had guessed the name of her escort even before the footman announced it. Nathaniel Ashbourne entered with the measured composure of a man who had rehearsed calm to conceal unrest. His naval uniform, dark and immaculate, carried the scent of sea wind and iron discipline. Yet his eyes, when they found hers across the rows of orchids, softened in a way that betrayed both memory and regret. "My lady," he said, bowing, "I am told we are to conclude together what was, it seems, never meant to begin apart." She inclined her head. "Duty joins where affection failed, does it not?" A faint smile touched his mouth. "If affection failed, I would not be here." She said nothing, turning instead toward the table where her mother's letters lay neatly bound. "The cipher is complex," she said. "I have managed to translate part of it, but some phrases remain beyond me. Then let us see what your courage has uncovered." They sat opposite one another at the long oak table, the glass walls around them gleaming with condensation. Outside, the rain had begun again, soft and rhythmic, a familiar percussion to their uneasy reunion. Eleanor slid one letter forward, her gloved finger tracing the faint ink. Nathaniel leaned closer, his breath brushing her wrist as he studied the symbols. "It is a numerical cipher," he murmured. "Each number corresponds to a word from shared text. Likely scripture. The Psalms, perhaps." "The handwriting is Pembroke's," she replied. "He cloaked treason and piety." Nathaniel nodded, eyes dark with thought. "You risk much in bringing this forward. Men of rank do not forgive those who expose them." "I have little left to lose," she said quietly. He looked up at her then, and the distance between them seemed to dissolve. "You once said that very thing before the Admiralty Ball. You claimed bravery was easier when one had nothing to protect." "Then I was a fool," she replied, "for I had something precious, and I let it slip away." A silence settled, fragile as spun glass. Somewhere beyond the walls, the sound of a clock marked the passing of a moment they could not reclaim. Nathaniel reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers. "Eleanor," he said softly, "you were wronged. The letters that damned you, they were not yours. The Duchess of Wexford had them forged. She sought to secure her cousin's advancement by destroying mine. I left because Hawthorne believed public denial would make matters worse. I thought silence would protect you." Her breath caught, and for a heartbeat she could not speak. "You allowed the world to think me faithless to save me. I thought exile would fade more quickly than scandal," he said, voice low. "I was mistaken." She turned away, her fingers tightening around the edge of the table. "You let me rot in the ruin of your name and mine. I defended you even as you vanished." He rose then, crossing to her side, his expression grave. "And I have defended you every day since, in silence, in exile, in prayer. If it is forgiveness you seek, I cannot command it. But I swear to you, I never cease to believe in your honor." The word struck her not as flattery, but as truth long starved of air. Slowly, she met his gaze. Beneath the weight of their shared history, something fragile stirred. Neither forgiveness nor forgetting, but the first tremor of understanding. They bent again to the letters, their shoulders nearly touching, their breath mingling as they deciphered line after line. Together they uncovered names. Aristocrats funding Irish rebels through covert charities, their plots reaching perilously close to the royal court. The knowledge hung between them like a blade. When the door creaked open unexpectedly, both froze. Footsteps approached, measured, deliberate. Through the glass panes, Eleanor glimpsed the reflection of two guards, their uniforms unmistakably royal. "Someone has betrayed our meeting," Nathaniel whispered. "We are not safe here." Eleanor's mind moved swiftly. She gathered the letters and slid them beneath a pot of orchids, their white petals trembling like witnesses to conspiracy. The guards entered moments later, faces polite but eyes sharp. "Commander Ashbourne," one said, "Sir James requests your presence immediately." "The Queen's orders." Nathaniel bowed slightly. "At once." He turned to Eleanor, his tone neutral but his eyes urgent. "My lady, thank you for your assistance. It seems the matter is settled." She inclined her head, matching his composure. "Of course, Commander. I am relieved our work is complete." The guards escorted him away. Only when their footsteps faded did Eleanor exhale. She touched the orchid pot gently, as if it were a living accomplice. The conservatory fell silent except for the soft patter of rain upon glass. She crossed to the window, her reflection wavering in the misted pane. Her heart ached, not merely from the danger, but from the tenderness she had tried and failed to smother. The man who had once destroyed her peace had, it seemed, also preserved her honor. The revelation cut both ways. When Nathaniel returned a few moments later, unescorted, his expression carried a gravity she had not seen before. "We are not finished," he said quietly. "The Duchess moves faster than we guessed. She suspects you." Eleanor looked at him steadily. "Then let her suspect. I have learned the taste of fear, and I'm no longer hungry for it." He smiled faintly, an expression both admiring and sorrowful. "You were never the timid Ducky they mocked. You were only waiting to take flight." She said nothing, but her heart trembled at the truth of it. The rain had stopped, leaving the glass clear enough to see the city's spires in the distance, shining under the fragile promise of dawn. In that moment, between peril and forgiveness, Lady Eleanor Harcourt knew that neither scandal nor sorrow would define her again, and that her reckoning, like the sun itself, was only beginning to rise. Morning light filtered through the high windows of Buckingham Palace, pale and cold as truth itself. The throne room, vast and resplendent, gleamed with a restrained grandeur that spoke of empire and expectation. Lady Eleanor Harcourt stood at its center, her gown of dove-gray silk the only softness amid the glitter of medals and polished boots. Every breath she drew seemed to echo through the marble floor. To either side of her, courtiers murmured like restless crows. The queen sat upon her throne, composed and inscrutable, her gaze sharp enough to unmake falsehood. And at the far end of the room, half shrouded in shadow, waited Nathaniel Ashbourne. It had come to this, a reckoning not of her choosing, but of her making. The letters she had hidden within the conservatory orchids had been delivered to the crown, copied and verified. Their contents had stunned the inner circle. The names of noblemen funding rebellion, the proof of correspondence between the Duchess of Wexford and Irish agitators who had turned charity into treason. Eleanor had not meant to become the center of scandal again, but justice, like disgrace, seldom asked permission. "Lady Harcourt," said Sir James Hawthorne, his voice reverberating against marble, "you come before Her Majesty accused of fabricating evidence and slandering peers of the realm. Have you anything to say before judgment is passed?" Eleanor's heartbeat thundered in her ears, but her voice, when it came, was steady. "Only that I speak the truth, and I have proof of it." The Duchess of Wexford stepped forward, her silks whispering like serpents. Her beauty was undiminished, her expression a careful mask of injured virtue. Her Majesty must see this for what it is, a desperate attempt by a ruined woman to reclaim her place among us. The letters are clever forgeries. Lady Harcourt's history of deceit precedes her. The words struck like blows, but Eleanor did not flinch. Instead, she unwrapped a small parcel from within her reticule. The very same seal that had once bound the treasonous letters gleamed beneath the chamber's light. "Your Grace," she said softly, "you speak of deceit as though it were not your native tongue. This was found among your correspondence, intercepted by those you thought loyal. The hand that forged my letters also penned these." A murmur rippled through the court. The Duchess's face tightened. A flush crept up her throat. "Lies," she hissed, though her voice trembled. "All lies." Before the Queen could speak, Nathaniel stepped forward. His presence filled the silence like a tide reclaiming the shore. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing low, "I can attest to the authenticity of Lady Harcourt's findings. I have seen these ciphers before, aboard His Majesty's ships, where secret sympathizers sent coded missives through channels of mercy. I would stake my honor upon her truth." The Queen regarded him coolly. "You are aware, Commander, that to stand with her is to stand against peers of your own station?" "I am aware, ma'am," he said, his voice low but unwavering. "But I have sailed through tempests that would split a ship in two. None were so cruel as a whisper-turned weapon." If Lady Harcourt's honor is to be weighed, let mine be the counterbalance. Eleanor felt something inside her shift, a quiet astonishment that this man, once the symbol of her ruin, would risk everything to speak her name in defense. The Duchess faltered, words deserting her. The silence that followed was the kind that crushed lies beneath its weight. Queen Victoria turned her gaze toward Eleanor. "You have suffered much for the sins of others," she said at last. "England demands loyalty, but it must also honor courage. You shall have our thanks, and your family's name shall be restored." A gasp rippled through the assembly. The Duchess of Wexford bowed stiffly, her defeat measured and silent, and withdrew without further word. Eleanor lowered her head, unable to trust her voice. The Queen rose, a gesture of rare grace. "Lady Harcourt, your resolve serves the realm. See that it now serves yourself." The formalities concluded, the crowd dispersed in murmured astonishment. Eleanor stood motionless, her pulse echoing through the hollow grandeur of the hall. The air felt lighter, though she could not tell whether it was freedom or disbelief that filled her lungs. Nathaniel approached quietly, his boots clicking softly against the marble. "It is done," he said. "Your name is clean again." She turned to him, her eyes luminous but composed. "Clean," she repeated, as though it were a dress to be laundered. "Do you think reputation so simple a garment?" He smiled faintly. "Perhaps not, but it looks well on you, whatever the fabric." For a moment, neither spoke. The distance that had once seemed unbridgeable between them now felt as fragile as mist. "I wronged you," he said finally, "in my silence, in my cowardice. If there is anything left in me worth your forgiveness, I give it freely to your judgment." Eleanor studied him, the proud set of his shoulders, the tired nobility in his gaze. "You once told me silence was the only honor you had left," she said softly. "But honor is louder when it dares to speak. You have spoken today, and the world has heard you." He bowed his head slightly. "Then let it hear this as well. I never ceased to love you." The confession hung between them, fragile and incandescent. She felt its warmth but did not reach for it. "Not yet. Love is not what I need," she said gently. "Not now. I have my life back, and I intend to live it before I offer it to anyone else." He nodded, respect dimming the ache in his eyes. "Then may that life be long, and may it lead you where peace resides. And you, Nathaniel," she said, "may your storms find calm." As he turned to leave, sunlight pierced the high windows, catching in the gilt trim of his coat. For a moment, he seemed less a man than the memory of one, brilliant, distant, and gone too soon. Eleanor stood alone once more, yet the solitude felt different now. It was not exile, but ownership. She walked to the tall windows, looking out upon the city where her disgrace had been born and buried. Bells tolled across the river, solemn and bright. The voice of the narrator, if one had been listening, might have said that the girl they once called the Ducky had finally learned to fly. But Eleanor needed no witness to know it was true. Her reflection in the glass was enough, calm, unflinching, and free. Outside, London shimmered beneath the pale sun, vast and unknowable. Within, Lady Eleanor Harcourt turned from a window and stepped into her future, unafraid of the echo of her own name.